Okay, class, I apologize for that. For some strange reason, I have no idea how that happened. My camera just suddenly clicked off here. Screencast-O-Matic that I record this to just shut down. So anyway, let's go back to our lecture here. And what this means is that when you watch this lecture, you actually have to watch it in two parts, part one, part two. And I'll have it right side by side. But what I started to mention also, in addition to the Homestead Act, we also had the Morrill Act to take place. And this created land-grant colleges, not in the South at this time. The South will benefit from this later. We have in Alabama today, we have two land-grant colleges. Auburn University is land-grant college. Alabama A&M, located in Huntsville, Alabama, is also a land-grant college. All right, so let's move on with our lecture here, folks. And how did the North support the war? Well, they did so in several ways here. They increased taxes. Now, this is going to be largely under Mr. Lincoln. Increased taxes on all goods and services, which is not fun for anyone. They also issued paper money which came through the Legal Tender Act. A little bit difficult to understand here, folks, and I'll try to drive you through this. We had regular money, which is often just referred to as yellowbacks, and yellowbacks were different than greenbacks. Here's what greenbacks look like. Now, this is the front of the greenback. This is the rear of the greenback here, and hence they get the name greenbacks itself. Here they are different colored than the regular currency. This is not backed by gold and silver. It's backed by faith in the government, and it led to a large inflation here. And it really, by the end of the war, it was only worth about 39 cents on a dollar. But it did decrease the amount of currency that was in circulation, and that's what the North did to support the war partially too. The North also borrowed money, and they would borrow money by selling bonds to the people. You know what I'm talking about, savings bond, that sort of thing. All right, so let's move on with the structure of the Army here. And surprisingly, for the United States Army, and that's what we're talking about here now, folks, we're talking about the North. And for the United States Army, when the war broke out, they had a standing army of 16,000. Mr. Lincoln authorized an increase to 23,000. That's nowhere near enough. Next time we got together, I'll mention to you several battles, and I'm going to try to keep this in moderation, but I will talk to you about the battle that took place at Antietam. It was the single bloodiest one-day battle in the American Civil War. We had 23,110 casualties. So in the United States Army, if we have an army of 23,000, that's it. You're done in one day of war. So obviously you have to increase the number. Mr. Lincoln increased that number, or Congress, I should say, increased the number of 500,000. So 500,000 soldiers in the Northern Army is still not enough. In 1863, the Congress passed, United States Congress passed what was called the National Draft Law, which did authorize, a conscription service here. It frightened young men. Actually, in the course of the war, only 46,000 people were drafted, but it did lead to a lot of concern. But eventually what you're going to find here is that 2 million Northern soldiers will serve fighting for the North. And out of that, we'll have 9% will be African American. 186,000 African Americans fought for the North, either in the Army or they fought or served in the Navy here. Generally, for these African Americans, it was menial labor jobs here, cooks, teamsters, that's drivers, if you will, guards. Very seldom did you see African Americans fight in actual combat. A couple of exceptions to that. Some of you probably seen the movie Glory, with the 54th Massachusetts with that. Okay, you could also get around the draft if you wish to do so by hiring a substitute. You could hire a substitute, somebody to go in your place. You could pay the government $300. And if you paid the government $300, you bought an exemption. That's in the North now, in the North. So it meant that if you were a poor individual and a farming type individual that had very little income, you had a good chance of going to the war and fighting for the North. If you had quite a bit of money, the chances are, you probably would not. You could get some kind of exemption, hire a substitute, or just pay the government there. Okay, so anyway, let's go back here and just pick up some more information with this. Mr. Lincoln referred to the war not as a designated war. In fact, what we did, we never had a declaration of war against the South. Mr. Lincoln referred to it as a domestic insurrection. I don't know why that's blurry. I'm just having trouble with my camera today here, folks. As a domestic insurrection. And this is kind of genius on the part of Mr. Lincoln, however. If you have a declared war, war, then you get your hands tied. You have to answer to Congress. You have to answer to the House, answer to the Senate. But if it's a domestic insurrection, you don't have to go to Congress to get approval for your actions with that. And for the North, they also established what was called an Anaconda Plan. All right, so I want you to think about this with the Anaconda Plan. Anaconda, as you know, is a serpent. It is a large snake, and it kills its prey by constriction. So let's just say, for example, here, and I'll use my hands for an example, if we could take the United States Navy and we can circle the South and establish blockades around the port cities there, then nothing goes in and nothing goes out. Well, what that leaves, it leaves the Mississippi River. Now, I'll let you use your imagination on this. So the Anaconda Plan will also include an encirclement from the Mississippi River down on this side here. So if you block off the coast and you block off the Mississippi River ports, then you literally strangle the South. And that's what they were attempting to do with the Anaconda Plan, and it worked quite effectively here. All right, let's go back here and we will continue here. Okay, so as we move on here. Interestingly, we had a presidential election to take place during the war. Okay, and this was a presidential election of 1864. Presidential election of 1864. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican candidate. He was challenged by his senior military commander. If you can imagine that, you would think that a military commander would be loyal to the president, but I guess not in that case, and not today, as a matter of fact, either. Okay, and the candidate for the Democratic Party was General George McClellan. Later in the class period, or next lecture, I'll show you a photograph of him. And notice in the presidential election, the electoral votes here, the results are 212 electoral votes for President Lincoln, and for George McClellan, 21 electoral votes. A landslide victory in the Electoral College. But I wrote a statement out for you. Mr. Lincoln only won 10% more of the popular vote than General McClellan. By the way, for General McClellan, Fort McClellan, Alabama is named for him. But I'll go back with what I said a second ago. Lincoln won only 10% more of the popular vote, and the South did not even vote in the election. So as popular as Abraham Lincoln is today, during the times of 1864 and 1865, Mr. Lincoln was not that popular. His popularity grew after the war and after his assassination. All right, so anyway. Now, after the Battle of Antietam, and I'll show you some photographs of Antietam next time we get together. Antietam, by the way, is in the northern parts of Maryland, not too terribly far from Gettysburg. All right, but in the Battle of Antietam, it was a northern victory by most historians' thoughts. I kind of think it was a stalemate, a draw with that. But this battle took place in September of 1862, and a few days after the battle, Mr. Lincoln announced that he would use his war powers authority. Wait a minute. War powers authority. I thought this was not a declared war. But anyway, that's what he said he was going to do, use his war powers authority to emancipate the slaves. Okay, and what he referred to that as is the Emancipation Proclamation. All of you have heard of this before. You've probably heard about it wrong for your instructors, from your high school instructors, middle school instructors, or whatever. But anyway, the Emancipation Proclamation, and I wrote this out for you good folks, and I stress this very strongly in my lectures. The Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves in all areas of the Confederacy except those under Union control. And that's important to think about that. It freed those slaves only in the areas of the Confederacy not under Union control. The United States Constitution does not prohibit slavery in 1863. And that's when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced in January of 1863. So Mr. Lincoln has no authority to free the slaves in any area controlled by the United States of America. So this means that the border states of Kentucky and Missouri and Maryland, the slaves in those areas are not emancipated. Those slaves that are in the area of the southern parts of Louisiana that the North controls, the parts of Tennessee that the North control, those African American slaves are not free. All right, and quite frankly, I question his authority on that. you have to have a constitutional amendment, and we will get that constitutional amendment. And shortly, as a matter of fact, not in this lecture, but a couple of lectures down the road here, that will abolish slavery as an institution in the United States of America. So don't get trapped on that. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free all slaves in the United States of America, only in those areas under Confederate control. And you need to understand that here. Okay, so shall we move right along here, folks? All right, now, with women, men gone to war, many women had to step up, take the place of a man. A couple of interesting ladies here that you've had an association with before. Dorothea Dix, U.S. Sanitary Commission. Not only was she engaged with asylum, she was also engaged with U.S. Sanitary Commission, trying to create battlefield hygiene. One lady who's known as Clara Barton, a battlefield nurse at the Battle of Antietam. Here's a likeness of Clara Barton. In 1888, she established the Red Cross, the American Red Cross. All right, two influential ladies here. Okay, here. When Virginia seceded from the Union, the Confederate States of America capital moved from Montgomery, Alabama, and went to Richmond, Virginia. And today, if you wish to visit Richmond, Virginia, it's kind of a fun place to visit. It's kind of a dangerous city. I'd be careful while you're there, particularly if you're going to be out at night. But if you do visit Richmond, take the time to go by the White House of the Confederacy. It's still present there today. You'll have to pay a fee to go inside. And the Confederates developed a constitution, this constitution, which was almost identical to that of the United States Constitution, other than it specifically allowed for slavery. Jefferson Davis, here's a likeness of Jefferson Davis here, was chosen by an electorate to be the president of the Confederacy. There was no vote that was attached to that. He was chosen from an electorate, and the tenure in office was 6 years. He never did serve the entirety of that 6 years. The vice president of the Confederacy was Alexander Hamilton Stephens, a brilliant individual, very small, about 5'4", weighed less than 100 pounds here. And by the way, he's from he's from Georgia. And if you're traveling through Crawfordville, Georgia, you can take the interstate exit there at Crawfordville and go to the home of Alexander Hamilton Stephens. All right, let's see if I have likenesses of both of those individuals here. And you can see Jefferson Davis, who's on this side here. Oops, did I get it right? Here's Alexander Hamilton Stephens, which is here. And then we have Jefferson Davis, which is over here on this side here. Okay, 6-year terms, and never served the entirety of those 6 years. All right, let's go back to our camera here. And let's see what we have. All right, now how did the South support the war? Well, with most Southerners being farmers, you don't have a lot of money, so you can't really tax people, with money. So you end up taxing with what was called a tax in kind, where you would take 10% of the produce. So we'll say, for example, here we have a farmer that has 100 acres of cotton. This means that 10 acres of cotton has to be donated to the South. All right, here. And the South also generated its own type of money, $1.5 billion in Confederate currency. $1.5 billion. Caused enormous inflation, 9,000% inflation. It was absolutely worthless. A $100 Confederate note at the end of the war was worth $1. All right, so that's not very much. Confederate currency today, if you have some of the original stuff, wish you'd donate it to Alan Rowland, and I'll gladly take it off your hands, but it's valuable currency today as collector's items, but by the end of the war, it was practically worthless. All right, for the Confederacy and supporting the war in 1861, they used volunteers. My great-great-grandfather enlisted in the Macon Rifles in 1861 and rose to the rank of first lieutenant and served for the duration of the war. So for the first year of the war, we took volunteers, and a lot of volunteers during the first year. And as the war started turning against the South, less volunteers would enlist. So by 1862, the Confederacy started the Conscription Act that would draft any male 18 to 35 years of age for 3 years. By this time, my great-great-grandfather had been captured at Island Number 10, and he was wasting away, if you will, in a prisoner of war camp at Camp Douglas, which is where Chicago is. During the meantime, he was exchanged. That means we take like 5,000 Confederate prisoners, 5,000 Northern prisoners, and we just exchange them back with each other here. And so my great-grandfather assumed he was going to be out of the service, only to return to the South to find out that the Conscription Act now had him at this time. So back in the Army he goes for 3 years. The 3 years was later extended to life, duration of the war, and it went from 17 years of age to 50 years of age. I don't believe I wrote that down for you too. Okay, so anyway, you could also get one white exemption for every 20 slaves that you had. And you remember now that most Southerners are not slave owners. So that means that if you're just a Southern farmer that's 18 years of age, you're going to fight for the Confederacy. And that's just it, with no choice with that, unless you went to the North here. Now, if you were a prosperous Southern family and you got one white exemption for every 20 slaves, let's say, for example, that we have a plantation that has 100 slaves. That means you get 5 white exemptions. So a dad and 4 sons don't have to serve for the Confederacy here. So it's not fair. It's not fair. So we can refer to it, as many people did at that time, it was a rich man's war, but it was a poor man's fight. All right. The Confederacy put into service 900,000 soldiers. 900,000. That's as opposed to the 2 million that the North put into service here. Always a problem with desertions here, particularly towards the end of the war. The Confederacy in 1864 had over 100,000 desertions in a single year. Another thing that went against the South was insisting upon states' rights, and for many of these states, they would jealously guard their own state materials, particularly Georgia and North Carolina. And even though we had soldiers that were threadbare from other states and with no shoes and no blankets, and surplus shoes and blankets in the treasuries, or I should say in the logistical chambers, if you will, of Georgia and North Carolina, they refused to give those out. So there was not a collective effort. All right. We had many food shortages that led to food riots in Richmond and many other places. There's always a shortage of like sugar, salt, things such as that. All right, now, as we start closing down here, folks, for Mr. Lincoln had a tough time in finding a quality commanding general. He used Winfield Scott Hancock for a period of time. He was just too old. He fought in the War of 1812, fought in the Mexican War. Here, we went with George McClellan, and he and Mr. Lincoln just could not get along very well. And who President Lincoln finally latched on to was a person by the name of U.S. Grant. Here's a likeness of him here, U.S. Grant here, Ulysses Simpson Grant, an interesting person, one of my favorite generals, by the way, and I like him very much here. His family were slave owners, even though he was from the North here, but U.S. Grant, he graduated from West Point. He distinguished himself in the Mexican War, and he'd been a failure in almost everything that he'd ever done, but he was one heck of a soldier. After the Mexican War, he was married to a lady by the name of Julia Dent, and he was sent to the West without her, and he was very lonely, and he began to drink quite heavily. And that would continue to plague him throughout the Civil War, even though I'm convinced that Grant did not drink, during any campaign. But it was always a struggle with alcohol for Grant. And the complaints from his fellow generals came to President Lincoln saying, he drinks all the time. And Mr. Lincoln would respond and say, I can't spare the man, the man wins in battles. And then Lincoln further down, he said, find out what kind of whiskey he drinks and send a case of it to all of my generals. They could use that. All right, so that was General Grant here. Okay, I also want to show you something else here, folks. Here, it was our first engagement where we found ironclads. These were ships that were not of sail. These were ships that had been refurbished, refinished, if you will, and had metal hulls on them. And one of the best engagements that took place here was the engagement of the Monitor and the Merrimack. Here's a photograph showing you the sign, historical sign there up at Hampton, Virginia, anyway. And it took place on March 8th and 9th, 1862, the Monitor and the Merrimack. And let me show you what it looked like here. And we'll go back here. And this is an artist rendering here. If you look at the This is a Monitor here, which is a northern ship. That's this one here. Some people call it a tin can on a shingle. And then we see the other ship here, which is the Merrimack, and that's the Merrimack here. It's that was a northern name for it. The Confederates put iron plating on it and rechristened it, I guess you would say, the CSS Virginia. Neither ship sunk the other ship during that engagement, but that's going to set the trend for ironclads to be constructed, for the remainder of the war. All right, so anyway, now when we come back next time here, folks, I've got a lot of campaigns to talk to you about, and I didn't mean to say it like that. I have several campaigns to talk to you folks about. We want to go through Manassas and Shiloh and Antietam and Gettysburg, are the 4 campaigns. All right, and a lot of visuals to introduce you to the next time we get together. All right, I'm sorry for that little slip up here, folks, on the video. I don't know why my camera cut out on me whatsoever there. But these 2 videos will be back to back. I'll try to label them so you can distinguish those anyway. Okay, thank you very much.